after listening to this album, my ahs are definitely oozing. Welcome back to another video with the Monkey Sensing Sensei, and today I have a very special episode of my series, Meditation Through Vinyl. And after my unboxing of Clockwork Angels and my video on my top 5 Rush albums, I take a break from the heavy prog, of all the long songs, the big epic pieces, and I need to go back to the basics. Back to the basics of punk. And I'm going to take you back to the year 1988 with one of my personal favorite records in punk history from one of the best bands of California punk. And I am, of course, talking about the amazing Bad Religion and their classic 88 LP, Suffer, on Epitaph Records. Now, most people talk about punk, they talk about the Ramones from the 70s and early 80s. Those might talk about Green Day and NoFX in the 90s. But of course, Bad Religion were both the 80s and the 90s. Now, before coming out the gate with this classic LP, Bad Religion would first release How Could Hell Be Any Worse back in 1982. Now, that album was more of a heavy raw punk affair with extremely lo-fi production. Brett Gurewitz, the band's leader and co-founder, actually had founded the label and band in his actual basement. That's where the band started, that's where the label started, in his basement. Funny to believe that now, because when you think about it, Epitaph is the biggest, if not one of the biggest, independent labels in punk history. But then a couple years later, back in 1985, they released the Back to the Known EP, which is basically them saying, we're sorry for making Into the Unknown, we're going back to our roots. And boy did they dig, that's a great, excellent EP, an excellent return to form after the more prog leanings of that horrid album that we're not going to no longer talk about. This record blew the hinges off the doors when this first came out. This album essentially changed punk rock for the late 80s going into the 90s. Now, when people think about 90s punk, they often think about Green Day, NoFX, The Offspring, but pretty much this album kickstarted a lot of that movement, and it would be the blueprint for punk in the 90s. I initially wanted this to be a perfect Zen, but I just couldn't do it, just solely because I love all the songs on here. But to me, this is the start of an excellent trilogy for the band, which I'm going to get into later. But this album is probably in my opinion, this actually might be the weakest of the trilogy. I prefer its sequels, No Control and Against the Grain, a whole hell of a lot more. But I do love this album to death, and I did have to give it props because it is the album that got the ball rolling and got the band really started on their 4 decades of dominance. Now, before I get into the track listing, you guys know I have to discuss the vinyl, and I have to show you guys what it looks like. Now, I got this version off of Bad Religion's website. So they were selling this LP. This one's actually kind of hard to find in the circles. It did get a reissue a few years ago. Now, I believe this is a 2014 or 2015 reissue. I'm not totally sure. All it says here is 1988. So it's pretty much just a reissue of the original one, but this is recorded and remastered from the original analog tapes and the coding, the analog plates. And it was a very simple label. Has Bad Religion on it. Has the track listing. Side 1. Well, it's actually side 2. I'm showing you side 2 first. And this is actually side 1, oddly enough. The labels are kind of off-center. And they're not totally like, this is this record. This is this side here. And you have to flip it over and kind of jigger it around, and then you get this side to make it even. So it's a little off kilter. But this album is so short. It's like, if you can tell, there's so much dead wax on it. Like, look how much dead wax is on it. This is the definition of punk right here. And now it's so short that half the record is dead wax. And let me tell you guys, as soon as you put this record on the turntable, it kicks off with the amazing and epic You Are the Government. Oh, what a great song this is. As soon as you hear this record, if you didn't hear Bad Religion back on their first album, and you didn't know what they were about, this album will show you what they're all about. The lyrics on here, the rhythms, the drum beats, the speed, the aggro, everything is showcased on this album. And I think it's a great starting point to really get into the band if you want to hear what 90s punk would sound like, as I mentioned earlier. because this album has such a great and heavy sound to it, and the guys pretty much produced this album themselves. There isn't really too much outside help. It's like almost a DIY punk record, but the production is almost something you hear from an album that came out a decade later. And I think songs like Thousand More Fools really showcase Greg Graffin and Brett Gurwitz's more thesaurus songwriting. Like, if you see some of the lyrics on here, it does come with a lyric sheet, which I'm actually going to show you now real quick because I forgot to do earlier. But some of the lyrics on here, you definitely need a thesaurus just to know what the hell they even mean. But the album continues its brazen assault with tracks like How Much Is Enough and When. Two more really heavy, speedy punk tracks to really get the blood flowing. And one of the few times this album decides to slow down, we get the amazing Give You Nothing, which is one of my personal favorites on this album. It's a very riff-driven track with really poignant and stinging lyrics. It also helps that this song has a really great and catchy sing-along chorus. Then the album continues the melodic hardcore assault on your ears with tracks like The Land of Competition, Forbidden Beat, and Best For You. The first of which is about kids going to California, Southern California, and becoming posers and trying to fit in with everybody else in the scene. The track after that, Forbidden Beat, to me really showcases the way the 80s were. And that ties in really swimmingly with the last song on side 1, Best For You. And this is just a simple song, it's a minute and change. And it's just a song about people thinking they know what's best for you, even though, of course, you know what's best for you. But people try talking down to you. And I love the line where Greg is saying that it's Judgment Day is here, but no, it's not Jesus. Take a look at all your peers. And now moving on to side 2, we have the title track, Suffer. And this track is great when it opens up the side with like these ringing drums and like this ringing percussion, and it just starts this speedy punk assault that continues from Best For You. And I think it's a great way to open up the second side, especially when you put the needle down and you hear the it's just like, whoa, what is this? And Delirium Disorder opens up with this odd lower pitched vocals of them saying delirium of disorder, but it's very low pitched in the mix, and then it kicks into this huge punk rock frenzy. And this song too is only about a minute and change. It just goes by so fast. This whole record is only about 26 minutes in length, so you're not sitting down for very long. And that's one thing I like about punk rock. If I'm not in the mood to listen to a long progressive album, or if I don't want to listen to, let's say, the Beatles' White Album, and I want to listen to something that's like more heavy but something that's shorter, I'll put on a punk album such as this. And this is probably the 20th time I've listened to this album up. But man, I love the cover too. And before I end the video, we're going to get into how much I love this cover and how iconic it is. But moving on, we have part 2, What Can You Do? And I love What Can You Do because one of the more slower jams on here, but it has an amazing solo. I just love the more kind of 50s doo-woppy rock and roll sound that it takes. It's different than anything on this record, and it definitely stands out because of it. Then we get to my favorite song on this album, Do What You Want. I love the lyrics of this song. I love how just angsty it is and just how like fuck you it is. Like, it's definitely the focal point of this song. One of my favorite lyrics on here is, I don't know if the billions will survive, but I'll believe in God when 1 and 1 are 5. That's perfect to me. This song gets even better with the chorus. Do what you must. Do all you can. Break all the fucking rules and go to hell with Superman and die like a champion. Yeah, hey! Just, so catchy and just so angsty. It just gets the blood pumping. And we're almost at the end of the record. This album has not really slowed down that much. And now really rounding the album out, we have part 4, the Index Fossil, and the excellent closer, Pessimistic Lines. And I gotta tell you guys, the way this album closes with Pessimistic Lines, it's so great. While it's so speedy like most of the record has been up to this point, the riff on it is so much more than the sum of its parts. The riff on here, it has this certain like light to it. Like, you know, this is when you hear this song, even if you haven't heard this record before, you kind of have an inkling like this is the end of the record, just because of how more hopeful this riff is despite the lyrics. And just the way it rounds out the album, I think it's just perfection. And man, I don't know what else to say. If you are just the least bit curious of punk rock and you've not listened to too much of it, or you're a little skeptical, I would totally give this record a chance. I will admit, the one flaw that this band has, if they have any flaws at all, that they do have this sort of tendency to make the same album twice. But if you're someone who can differentiate the differences in the albums, I think you'll really enjoy this band, because this band is definitely worth getting into, whether you like hard rock or metal or anything in between. If you like intelligent music with intelligent lyrics and just an overall great production, I would totally check this record out. Nolly likes it. She loves punk. Bad Religion is one of her favorite bands, right, Nolly? And while this album isn't the best Bad Religion album in my opinion, the best would be shortly to come. This album is a stepping stone in not just punk music history, but I would say in music history. And while this album isn't my favorite Bad Religion album by any means, it's definitely up there, and it definitely shows the potential and the talent that these guys had and would go on to show going forward. And between this album, No Control, and Against the Grain, that would form the big three of punk rock in the late 80s and I guess 1990 as well. That would really showcase this band's potential and their staying power in the land of punk rock and just music in general. And before I end the video, guys, I just wanted to show you the cover in full detail. You can see like this normal suburban area. You have this kid on fire. I really love the symbolism of this too. I don't know if it was done on purpose, but I love how it has the kid on fire, alright? But then you see the suffer in like black coal lettering, while it also looks like graffiti. Now you think because the kid's on fire, he has a punk attitude, and a lot of punks would do graffiti. So I think whether it's intentional or not, that really ties into the theme of this album and the pure angst and aggression that it has. Moving on to the back cover, I love this photo. It's very grainy, very iconic late 80s photo of the band. You got Greg Graffin just rocking out, you got the guys on the back just rocking out, playing their music. It's great, and I love the track listing in yellow. You have Epitaph right here, you have all the band members right here. It's just a beautiful back to the LP. And I think it's a crime when you buy this on CD because you don't get the full effect of the photo of this shot. Like many iconic album covers, it's best seen on a vinyl LP that's 12 inches. I want to know, what's your favorite Bad Religion album? Is it Suffer? Is it No Control? Is it Against the Grain? Is it Recipe for Hate? Is it Stranger Than Fiction? Is it The Process of Belief? They have so many great albums. This band has been out for almost 40 years. They produce so much great music. And I think it's a great thing that they've been able to bless us with so much great music over these past 4 decades. With all that being said, guys, I'm going to head out for the day. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to like, comment, hit that subscribe button, smash that notification bell so that way you can be enlightened on my future uploads to the channel. And before I go, you guys know I have to say it. Make sure you keep on meditating through vinyl.